Achieving types may already be looking ahead to week 8. So I wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about that. I did that a couple of weeks ago. I talked about it, but I wanted to talk about it just a little more. I know in week 4, I think the last time we did a Zoom, that people weren't necessarily thinking about the week 8 proposal, but now that we're getting closer, it might be a little bit more on people's minds. So I'm just going to read it kind of word for word, but I'm going to stop every once in a while and just sort of provide some more details. My dog is standing right beside me with his head, like, so if he pops in, I think he thinks I'm talking to him right now. I'm not talking to you, bud. All right. So each student is to complete a research proposal. Keep in mind, this is just a research proposal. So you're not actually going to be doing the study. That sometimes confuses people. They think they actually have to do a study. You do not have to do a study. You're simply going to propose or describe a study that could be done. So basically, you're going to do just like a researcher would do if they're writing a journal article, except you're not going to actually do the study. You're going to lay out everything that would be done. To address a specific hypothesis. So here we go. I'm going to actually give you the topic for this. When I was designing this course, probably a year and a half or so ago, my initial thought was I would let students come up with their own topics. But I know from being a doctoral student, probably the hardest part of doing research is not the actual design or doing the study, it's coming up with a topic. So I thought, you know what, just to kind of make this process a little smoother, I'll give them a topic. And then that way, all you have to do is sort of come up with the design. So the topic for the proposal is as follows. A sales manager believes that salespeople who are high on the personality trait of agreeableness are best at sales. All right, so that is a manager's belief, is that people who have this personality trait of agreeableness, which is one of the big 5 personality traits, that they will be better salespeople than basically folks who are low on agreeableness. And so the manager wants to develop a study to examine this belief. So that's it. All right, that's sort of the topic. And honestly, that's where most research comes from, is that someone just is kind of observing the world around them and goes, boy, my best salespeople, they really are high on agreeableness. And they go, I wonder if that's true kind of for the population. So it's just sort of our observations of the world that lead to hypotheses and eventual studies. So here we go. Your research proposal is to be double spaced, times New Roman, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, and in APA format. The body of your paper should be 5 to 7 pages in length. That does not include the title page and the references. Now, here's the thing. If you wrote 4.5 pages, am I going to be upset and dock you because you only wrote 4.5 pages? I'm not. If you write 8 or 9 pages, am I going to be upset and dock you for that? I'm not. I'm going to wonder why you wrote 8 or 9 pages, because, wow, this proposal really should not take 8 or 9 pages. So just please don't feel like you have to just write and write and write. 5 to 7 pages will certainly do it. And again, if you got to 4.5, don't feel like you just have to add stuff to get to 5. So just some of the questions that I've tried to anticipate when I developed this project, just questions that people would ask. And so I've tried to give details. So your title page, formatted according to APA manual. Note there is not a running head on the title page of student papers. Running heads typically are for manuscript submissions to journals. I know a lot of professors, they want the running head on the title page. Just for this paper, don't put it. If you have future professors and they really want that running head, and my dog is really wanting attention. He was home all by himself all day long today, so he's being kind of needy right now. Go away. Go see mama. All right, so there we go. Title page, 5 points. Not gonna lie to you, I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at the title page, because I really want to see, how you design this study. That's going to be much more of my interest. But anyway, give it a title page. Make sure it's APA formatted, all that good stuff. Introduction. This is the first section of the paper after the title page. The introduction typically does not have a heading. So typically on that first page after the title page, you'll typically have the title restated, and then you'll go right into the introduction, but it will not be labeled the introduction. It is the introduction, but it won't necessarily have that heading. See the APA manual for how this should look. This section should draw from 2 or 3 scholarly sources. A keyword there is scholarly. So not necessarily websites or newspaper articles, but actual peer-reviewed, sort of refereed journals. And we say 2 to 3 sources. I mean, really try to draw some meat from them. Don't just have like a sentence, one sentence that has like Smith, 1984. I mean, that was a reference, but really try and draw some meat from those 2 to 3 sources. What will those 2 to 3 sources cover? Well, don't necessarily try to find studies that have looked at agreeableness in sales. I think sometimes that's a mistake that people make on an assignment like this, is they go out and they try to find existing studies that have been done on agreeableness in sales. That's not necessarily what you're looking for. This introduction, this initial section, what you're really looking for is just, a couple of articles dealing with maybe just personality, or a couple of articles dealing with sales, or maybe articles that have looked at the link between personality and sales. But you're not necessarily just trying to find exact articles on agreeableness and sales. So after you kind of lay out, the general gist of where you're headed with this study in the introduction, you're going to jump to the hypothesis. A hypothesis, this section, basically it's just going to be one sentence, right? It's going to be labeled, just use a heading, hypothesis. And it's just going to be one sentence. It's going to be your specific hypothesis for the study. And I think in this actually week 7, I believe maybe we talk a little bit about hypotheses. But there's a gazillion examples of hypotheses, all over the internet. And your book, gives some examples of hypotheses. There's not necessarily one right way to form a hypothesis. There's many different ways. So don't necessarily think that there's one answer for how the hypothesis should look. I will say this though, your hypothesis needs to fit your design. For example, if you're doing a correlational study, then your hypothesis is going to say, should be, what is the relationship between A and B, right? If it was a correlational study. If your study is an experiment, then your hypothesis would say, what is the effect of A on B? Does that make sense? Right? You really want to make, I've got you guys kind of minimized because when I had your faces up, I couldn't see my whole screen. So let me bring you guys back in. Any questions about that? Does that make sense? How you really want the wording of your hypothesis to fit your design? There's got to be, they got to be in sync. Again, if you're doing a correlational study, looking at the relationship between 2 variables, then your hypothesis should really fit that. What is the relationship between A and B? If your study is going to be an experiment, then your hypothesis would say, what is the impact or what is the effect of A on B? So there really needs to be sort of this symmetry between the 2. The next one there is the lit review. Sorry, guys, I have to minimize your faces again. I can't see my screen. Literature review. So in the lit review, we're gonna get a bit more in depth on the literature. So in the introduction, we just had 2 or 3 sources. The lit review, we're gonna get a little deeper here, 8 to 10 sources. Again, I can't stress enough. Don't necessarily try and find studies that look at the relationship between agreeableness and sales. Now, if you find some, that's great. But that's not necessarily what we're looking for. I know the last time I taught this course, I had people calling me. It's like, hey, I can't find 8 to 10 sources on the relationship between agreeableness and sales. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you found 8 to 10 studies that already looked at that, you wouldn't be studying it, right? You want to find for this lit review some articles that have looked at and some research that has looked at agreeableness and maybe how agreeableness relates to job performance or how agreeableness relates to persuasion. And maybe you want to find, some studies that looked at sales and the characteristics of effective salespeople, whatever the case may be. But again, the key thing here is we want scholarly, not just websites, really just not websites, not newspaper articles. We want peer-reviewed, journal articles. Proposed methods. So this is the big one. If you look at the points, proposed methods, 50 points. This is sort of the meat of the paper. This is what I'm really going to pay. Well, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's what I want to pay the most attention to. This class is a research design class. I'm really interested in how you folks take a hypothesis and then how you decide to examine it. So proposed methods describe the design of the study to the degree that someone could replicate it. So, you're almost in the proposed methods section of a paper, it's almost like you're writing a recipe, right? I mean, if you made a meal and someone came over your house and they're like, oh, this is amazing, I want to make this at home. I mean, you would write out every detail so they could go home and replicate what you did. And that's what we're doing here. You, in a journal article, you want to lay out the design of your study in so much detail that someone could come behind you and do it to a T, just the way that you did it. So discuss the sample that you would use in this the study, where they would be drawn from, maybe how many people would be in that design, or excuse me, how many people would be in the sample. The design of the study, whether it be an experiment, correlational, causal comparative, et cetera. And I'll give you a hint, the type of design that you would be using for this type of study it would be one of the three that's listed there. Well, let me just tell you, you would not do an experiment to study this because with an experiment, you have to manipulate a variable. And you could not manipulate a person's personality trait, right? We could not go in and manipulate a person's personality trait to see if it made them better at sales. So experiments basically off the table. You will be doing a correlational study or a causal comparative, one of those two. All right, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to talk about the measures that would be used. So specifically, you would need to talk about how agreeableness would be measured. And the good news is there's lots of measures of agreeableness that already exist. And you would also then talk about how sales would be measured. Because one of the things that we do in research papers and research studies is we have to lay out very, very carefully and clearly how we're going to measure our independent variables and dependent variables. Let's see. There you go. And then, of course, last but not least are the references. Just to a T, make sure that you do everything by the book there in terms of the references. APA, make sure you're italicizing the right things, that you are capitalizing the right things, that you're not capitalizing the things that are not supposed to be capitalized. As you guys probably know, the article titles in APA are a little weird in terms of what gets capitalized. It's typically just the first letter and the first letter after a colon, unless something's a proper name, which typically throws people off. Anyway, okay, that was lots of me talking, and so I want to give you guys here a chance to ask questions. So who do I have on here? How many folks we got? Let's see. Hey there, Daphne. Let's see. I'm quite the tech whiz here. I say that with much sarcasm. Let's see. Oh wow, we got several on here. All right, good deal. All right, questions. Any questions on that?
No question for me. I just am glad that you kind of clarified out of the three different study methods, which one would be the most effective, because I was looking at experiments first and I was like, how are you gonna have to manipulate, and then you got to do a trade-off between internal and external, and then if you do a trade-off and you just say, well, I just want external validity instead of internal, then the study is not really proof, like it's not really. So you have to take people above. And then I kept saying, you talking about floor sales, you talking about phone sales, you talking about, and so my mind was just going all kinds. Yeah.
Well, and that's a great question. I mean, on sales, you folks are free to choose whatever kind of sales you want. It could be home sales, car sales,
Yeah.
pharmaceutical sales. You guys can you can focus on whatever dependent variable you want there. Any type of sales. As far as the independent variable though, agreeableness. It is not something that one could manipulate. And to do an experiment, the independent variable has to be something you can manipulate. And so, experiment's just off the table. Now, someone might say, well, we could send people to sales training and we could train them on how to be more agreeable. Theoretically, yes, but, we're looking at the personality trait of agreeableness, and no amount of training is necessarily going to, change someone's actual personality trait. The definition of personality is, it's an enduring characteristic. And so we're not going to do that. So yeah, correlational study is the way to go. You could do a causal comparative. In a causal comparative study, you would take and basically measure a bunch of people in terms of their personality. And then you would take like maybe all the high people in agreeableness and all the low people and just compare those two groups. But that's a design that lacks something what we call power and sensitivity. So correlational is really the way to go. But so I'm kind of giving that away that's a design, but I just really want to see how you guys take a design, even if I've kind of given it away. I just want to see how you guys take that and run with it to fill in all the gaps and fill in all the details of it. Good. Other questions? Whoa, not all at once there. Not all at once.
Now I'm gonna have to go because these chapters are full of content and I'm trying to keep up with. So I'm jotting notes as I'm going because I'm looking at this paper. I'm like, okay, I gotta remember it, because it's like it's piecing it together as it goes along. And at the end, and we're talking about sampling methods and all of that stuff right there. But I can't, and I'll have to look, and forgive me if I've forgotten this, but with correlational studies, I would have to look at the control part of, because I think is that more confined to the experimental? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, so that's what I want to make, and I'm trying to
treatment groups and control groups. That's for experiments.
Okay,
that's when you're manipulating a variable,
right?
And you won't be manipulating anything in this study.
Okay, all right. So I just because I'm trying to keep up with.
Yeah.
I think to me, with all of these sort of broad statements, the only way you get to anything that's meaningful, whether, particularly from a correlation perspective, is to narrow it down. To your point, what kind of sales? And, we could talk about personality traits of agreeableness, but I might be super interested in that for software sales or B2B sales, or and then in my mind, and not simple, because nothing's simple, but we're really trying to say if on an agreeableness scale, these 1,000 people in this type of sales fit XYZ, on the agreeableness scale, and then we're comparing that against their sales, whatever metric we come up with. And then we can do correlation that says, with what degree of confidence, or, how does their sales success move with their agreeableness? I mean, that's kind of how we describe this, right?
Correct. Absolutely. The correlational study, you just want to see if the two variables are co-varying, moving.
And to what degree, right?
That's right. The more, and so let's think back to part one of the assignments for this week, which I am through group 8. I'm not 8. 3. I'm through cohort 3. 3.2 I'll have done by tonight. the past 2 days have been absolutely nuts. But anyway, but I'll have that done by the night for 3.2. I'm kind of OCD and I like to get things graded very quickly. And so the fact that I've carried over till Thursday is about to make me go and have seizures.
Hey, we've had people take 2 weeks. Don't worry
Yeah,
about
no, that's my head would explode if I took more than 2 days. But anyway, let's think back to part one. Part one of this week looked at the correlation between aerobic exercise and cognitive functioning. And that was an actual study that I ran across, and on the surface, it looks like, wow, well, the more you do aerobic exercise, the higher your cognitive functioning. And it's true, there's a correlation there, but that doesn't necessarily mean, and it was with dementia patients, and it's tempting to go, well, okay, so with dementia patients, we need to get them all exercising and doing lots of aerobic exercise, and then their cognitive functioning would be high. And again, maybe that's the case, but, is it possible that those who are still have high cognitive functioning, where their dementia has not really set in, extensively yet, maybe they are still at a point where they're able to do more aerobic functioning? And as their cognitive functioning declines, they get to the point where they can't necessarily do the aerobic exercise. And I guess why that article struck a chord with me when I first read it was two reasons. Number one, it was just so bad from a research standpoint. But number two, I think about my grandmother who passed away from dementia. And when she first went into this memory care nursing home, she would just circle and circle and circle and circle all day long, just walk around this place. Well, at that point, her cognitive functioning was higher. Her dementia wasn't, it was bad, but it wasn't, terrible yet. But as her cognitive decline got worse, she stopped doing as much aerobic exercise. So in other words, it was B that was causing A more so than A was causing B. But anyway, I'd say this, correlational designs have weaknesses. This study where you're looking at agreeableness and sales will have weaknesses, but it really is the only way to study the relationship between these variables, because agreeableness cannot be manipulated. And that's just, that's the notion of correlational designs. You kind of hold your nose and do them, and you realize that they're limited in what they can tell you, but at the same time, in some cases, they're all we can do. If we wanted to look at the relationship between a person's height and their self-confidence, we would have to do a correlational study, because we could not manipulate a person's height, right? We couldn't saw them off at the knees to make them shorter to see if their confidence went down. We would have to just take people and measure their height and confidence. So, but Stephanie, something else you said there, and I know I'm just on a tangent here, but I promise I'll wrap it up here in a sec. It is, the type of sales. It might be that agreeableness is very much correlated to sales in, let's say, selling cars. But it might be that agreeableness is not very correlated to sales and selling software. I think you said software. So it's interesting, the type of sales that you choose. And
I think the product that you sell also, and who you're selling to, is it consumer? Is it B2B? Is it, because frankly, I don't want an agreeable banker or financier. I want a really knowledgeable expert. They can be cranky if they know what they're doing. I'm okay with that.
Agreed. And so even if we find a correlation between agreeableness and sales, it would be a very narrow finding, and it would really only relate to that specific aspect of sales that we studied. We couldn't say that it was related to all sales, global sales, if you will. So no, good stuff. By the way, I'm sorry. I just have this. I have this tendency to get wicked close to my camera. I don't know why I do that, but I know
we could do that.
Yeah. Other questions?
Okay, so I'm okay, so I think I'm a little confused. I thought I was okay. So I remember you mentioning before that correlational study was best. So because we know that there are weaknesses and we're not doing this full out.
Well, hold on. When I said correlational studies were best, like here in this call,
Yes,
correlational study would be the best choice
for this,
for this
yes,
particular
because I know
topic.
overall a true experiment is the absolute best.
There we go. There you
I
go.
got that drilled in my
Okay.
head. Yes. Yes. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, and I probably could make more sense of it if I was actually in the middle of it, but because we're just mapping everything out, do we actually, I'm thinking we don't have to really worry about the other variables that could be a factor, like A may not necessarily be related. We don't have to worry about all of that.
No, you don't. In a true correlational study, you would measure your independent variable and your dependent variable, and then you would measure a number of other what we call extraneous variables. You would measure age, you would measure gender, you might measure years of experience, those types of things. And you certainly could mention those, you certainly could, but I'm not expecting that you guys are going to come up with this, complete list of demographic variables and extraneous variables that you might, no, you don't have to.
But relevant to say that, we can draw this correlation, but there are other things that could impact or moderate this result.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And when you have Dr. Birch's class, she'll talk about statistics, but if you got your independent variable and your dependent variable, in this case, personality, agreeableness, and sales, you would correlate those two. You would actually use a technique called regression, and you would correlate those two, but simultaneously you would factor in all these other variables in order to basically rule them out, to sort of remove them. You would put them into the equation to basically account for their effects. But anyway, so yes, Regina, you certainly can mention that you would measure those other things, but they are truly extraneous. What we're mostly concerned about is, agreeableness and sales.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions related to the study? I think that week, that week, that's, you got your devotion, you got your discussion. And then the paper, and that's it. And, a lot of that paper, you're gonna have to find some lit review and whatnot, some articles, some sources, but a lot of it's also just going to come from here. You're going to be applying kind of the tools and techniques you've learned through the class. So part of it's going to be somewhat kind of free flowing, when you write it, free flowing in a technical, kind of way. Other questions about the paper? All right. Well, good stuff. Obviously.
Hold on, Dr. AG. So let me ask one more question.
Sure.
So that makes perfect sense that a lot of the lit review will be from the top of our head.
Not the lit review.
I mean, well,
the actual method section. The
yes.
method section, you'll be applying,
right.
Kind of the techniques and tools you've learned from this class. And here's the thing: in the method section, you don't need to go crazy with citations.
Okay.
When you say, this study would use a correlational design, you don't need to find a citation for that. A correlational, it's like saying the sky is blue. You don't need to get a reference to say the sky is blue or the grass is green. A correlational design is it's a design, it's a common technique. And so you don't need to get a reference, to say that you're using correlational design. And I guess that's what I mean by kind of free flowing, is there's a lot of things, you can say, we're going to get a sample of 200 car salesmen that work for CarMax. Now, no one can do that. I just came up with that, right? But if you're going to say, hey, I'm going to use 200 cars, 200 salespeople, I know I took that one away from you. But the point is, you wouldn't have to get a citation for that. That's you as a researcher talking about how you would do the study. So I guess that's what I mean by free flowing.
Okay.
Is you're going to be coming up with these details for how you would do the study, but you don't have to cite it. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was making sure of, because we've had some professors who wanted to make sure that everything was quote unquote scholarly or from something peer reviewed. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly there's certainly in your introduction and lit review, there's things you're going to have to cite a lot of that. But in the actual proposed method, you're talking about, as a researcher, how you would use the tools and techniques to come up with this design.
Got it.
So I could tell you guys have had APA and references and citations drilled into you, because on the discussion forums, I'll ask you questions for your opinions, and you guys will get citations for your opinions. And I'm like, no, I want your opinion.
Oh, we got told we had to do that.
Yes,
Oh,
you
my
have
word.
no clue.
Yes,
It drives me crazy. I'm like,
You have no clue, Dr. AG.
I purposely designed those questions for your opinion, and I'm like, you don't need to cite your own opinion, but anyway.
Better to have the site than not.
Exactly.
guess.
Look, because we've been dinged for not having citations.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I get it.
5 points.
Same thing with the
Yeah.
same thing with the question between whether we're doing a professional paper or student paper.
Yeah.
We have to bring that up almost every course.
Yeah. I if someone put a running head on it, I'm not going to ding them for that. Yeah.
That'd be the exception.
Yeah. Oh, Daphne, you're muted on us.
I'm
There you
sorry.
go.
I'm just glad to see a 5 to 7, then a 20 to 25. That's all paper. That's what I'm glad about. I'm not.
I wouldn't give
Amen.
20 to 25 because I don't want to read 20 to 25. I'm not gonna lie to you. The more I give, the more I have to read. So yeah. Well, very good. Any others? All right. So folks, you know that obviously, you can certainly reach out to me. You can text me, you can email me. We can even set up a time to talk by phone, or even a Zoom if need be. So this is not the end all be all when it comes to this paper. I mean, certainly as you get closer and put pen to paper, you might have more questions that come up. So definitely holler at me. So. All right, very good. Very good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and post. I'll post this video later on. It takes a while for Panopto to kind of put everything together and put it into a link. But I'll post this just in case you need to come back to it, or any of your classmates need to come back to it later. So.
Thank you. I was going to ask if you was going to post it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I will. Like I said, it usually takes an hour or so, maybe, to for it to do what it needs to in the cloud, to
Okay.
all that good stuff. But yeah. All right, folks. Well, hey, I know it's not Friday yet, but we're close enough. So have a good weekend.
Yes. Thank you. You do the same.
All right,
You too.
folks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We'll see y'all. Take care. Bye-bye.